Hello and welcome to the Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm joining all the way across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Hyped for Andor.
Hype for Andor, that's right. We're gonna dive into that in a little bit. For you, looking forward to our show today. First, we're talking, of course, about A Princess, a Scoundrel, and a novel by Beth Revis, all at the same time. We're gonna do all three at the same time. Also, as mentioned, thoughts on the eve of Andor. It's coming up soon, and those watching on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. You can see we got our guest in, Doc Holocron. You're back to talk all about these things. How are you doing?
Very good.
Right on. You're very good. All right, do the get little plugs up before we get going. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. Yeah, we're also, of course, on Twitch at Ion Cannon Pod. And yeah, give us a shout out. Ask us questions, give us comments, and we will respond. We will engage. Always happy to have those conversations. Also, the Tractor Beam every Thursday or Friday. Comics come out Wednesday. Thursday or Friday, I give my kind of 5 minutes per book, little discussions, spoilery commentary on the comics that have come out that week. This past week, we got Bounty Hunters number 25 and Obi-Wan number 5, the final issue, and one of the best short runs of the new canon. That is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as is every episode of the Iron Cannon podcast. Of course, it's available here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, and of course on Twitch and Twitter, but Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you're inclined to do audio only. Alrighty, Joel, let's kick us off with your week in Star Wars. What have you got for us this week?
Well, this week, I'm actually going to go with what I wrote in the notes. You know what? I've been thinking about all these Disney Plus shows we're getting, and we're going to get Andor. And Andor is like they say, the most adult Star Wars. And, once we get back to Bad Batch and Mandalorian, I'm curious if, I think any of us are going to suffer, tonal whiplash. It's like we had Book of Boba Fett, which is very much Boba Fett doing some cool things. We had Kenobi, a little intimate, but more in the line with traditional Star Wars. And now we're going to get Andor. Probably the most adult Star Wars thing, if we believe the reviews to be true. So I'm curious. Doc, I'll start with you since you're our guest. Do you think you're going to suffer from any tonal whiplash going from show to show? Or are you kind of able to see them all as each doing their own little thing?
I mean, I don't really think I'll suffer from tonal whiplash. I've accepted that Star Wars can be goofy and serious, at once. We can go from things like some of the sillier episodes of Resistance to freaking some of the darkest Star Wars we've seen in Mando and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I've just accepted this Star Wars franchise is varied in terms of tone, so I don't really see an issue unless Bad Batch season 2, because as Star Wars shows tend to do, they tend to get progressively darker and more mature as they go on. And Bad Batch season 1 had some of those moments for sure. So, honestly, as long as it stays good and as long as it stays consistent tonally, I don't think I'll have any whiplash. I'm just excited to see how this all connects. Especially with Bad Batch, we know how Mando and even kind of Obi-Wan are all connecting and stuff and influencing larger things. We still have no idea what Bad Batch is ultimately leading to. What is that going to contribute to everything? And not say it has to, it can just be its own thing, but what's the plan,
Yeah. Matthew, your same question.
Yeah, I'm going to keep on going with these food metaphors. I just keep rolling with those. You got your salad, and then you got your bread and your soup, and then you got maybe some gelato. I don't know how that works. Then you got a rich meat, and then some more gelato, and then a pasta, more gelato. I don't know how that works. And then your cake, and then some more gelato. I don't know. We've talked about Star Wars being a rich meal of and we're more, I guess, we're blessed now than we ever have been. I think some things, it just might be just so much content coming out with Star Wars and with Marvel and with all, there's 4 different shows going on. None of them are Star Wars right now that I'm watching, and they're all pretty great. So yeah, I mean, it depends on what we might see happen is more, not so much fracturing of audience, but I mean, there are going to be people who gravitate towards. It's naturally always going to happen. There are people going to gravitate towards one show over the other. Going to have maybe little pockets, but even if people do tend to watch everything or read everything or whatnot, so yeah, maybe I don't know about Whiplash. I get the question. I get the point. Um, it is what another question is. I'll get to this a little bit with my own point here, but how is Lucasfilm going to be able to handle all these different tones and genres, and the way Marvel again, the comparison with Marvel is there, it's salient because they've just mastered every little thing that they've set out to do, both in terms of interconnected story of different genres in both film and now on Disney Plus. And will Lucasfilm be up to the challenge in terms of those different things? I mean, again, it depends on who they bring in and who they get to tell these stories to. That's part of the compelling thing. So, I mean, one thing I hope doesn't happen is, we sleep on Bad Batch, say the way people slept on Resistance. I keep saying that because it was a little kiddie and a little more silly. Omega is going to be is the self-insert character for kids and for younger audiences that people might mistake that for a less serious show and just because it's animated. And so I think that might happen. I will say, and I just mentioned, I went from Bounty Hunters number 27 to Obi-Wan number 5 within about half an hour, in the same half an hour reading those two books. And I mean, those are very different. Those are totally very different. Yeah, I guess I had to do a bit of a reset. I had to close one book, go upstairs, check my phone, drink some water, whatever. But then I sat down and got into a different headspace. And so, if anything, that diversity was nice. That mix was, it wasn't just one flavor at the same time. It was all different things. So I'm not too worried.
I've a Force Center podcast always talk about the Star Wars buffet. And I think that's always the best way to look at Star Wars, the buffet, the food metaphor. And some people like if let's make a prediction. Like if Andor is like fine cooked lobster, pristine, off the cuff. I mean, I'm not a big lobster fan, although I'm probably gonna love Andor. But some people really want their Star Wars to be fine lobster. And then Mandalorian, let's say Mandalorian's like Carl's Jr. We could say McDonald's, but let's give it a little higher end. Like Wendy's. Let's say like a Wendy's. Like Wendy's isn't always best for you, but you know what? I like my Wendy's. Yeah. I feel like McDonald's more, to be quite honest. I like my burgers and my fast food fries. But you want a healthy, you want a balanced meal. Sometimes you want your McDonald's. Sometimes you want your lobster, and then sometimes you want, I guess, Kenobi is like your Caesar salad, somewhere in the middle.
Sorry.
Prime steak. Prime steak. When I think maybe that's why early on we went from Mando to Book of Boba Fett, just felt like, oh, here's more McDonald's, and I like McDonald's. It's like there's too much McDonald's. And then once you got Kenobi, you got your prime steak. Yeah. And now we're getting our fine, expensive lobster with Andor, it seems like. And who knows what Acolyte will be. But I think if we kind of have that mentality of the Star Wars buffet where it's like, you know what, I don't like lobster, but I'll have my Caesar salad. Or, I'll have my prime rib.
The Acolyte will be a super spicy, I don't know what, like a super spicy pizza with lots of, like gourmet pizza. With lots of jalapenos and bell peppers. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Make me hungry. But
I'm full.
Just sort of say of Star Wars. I think that's a good mentality to have. But I think as long as we keep that, it's like don't expect everything to be either McDonald's or fine lobster. Right. Then I think you're good, and just trying to judge it on its own.
Yeah. So on a similar note, my thought is the thought of been continuing for the last while, but since what's it called, Rogue Squadron doesn't look like it's happening, or at least anytime soon. Doesn't look like Taika. Who knows what's happening with Taika's film? Who knows what's happening with Rian Johnson's films? Whatever. I think we need to just stop. I mean, okay, on the one hand, I get the whole event of Star Wars in theaters. I mean, again, I've mentioned this multiple times here and in different podcasts, but I get the event of it, the Kenobi event, seeing Rogue Squadron in IMAX a few weeks ago. Those were fun. Those were wonderful. There's something to that.
Andor got to the theater.
Seeing an Andor theatrical event and all that. I think there's something to that, but Lucasfilm just doesn't seem to be investing in that right now. And I think at least for me, I've made a lot of peace with that, and I've said, okay, they're focusing on Disney Plus, they're narrowing in, and I think the reason for that gets at what I've been saying about Tony Gilroy and Star Wars, is that all of us and the whole debate conflict around the sequel trilogy is we all have different ideas of what Star Wars is that we bring into a film, that filmmakers bring into a film. And if we go into a multi-billion-dollar film that doesn't say this is what I think Star Wars is, we're all going to just run out of the theater screaming and going to taking to Twitter and all that vitriol, nonsense, rancor, whatnot. The thing about a Disney Plus series is that it can take the time to establish what Star Wars this is, what part of Star Wars this is. Mandalorian is clearly took the time to establish this is original trilogy. This is Bounty Hunters, gritty, Wild West. Kenner Toys, Wild West. Jon Favreau's generation. Deborah Chow with Kenobi had to take the time. It took good 4 or 5 episodes really to say this is a continuation of Revenge of the Sith. This is, I should have worn my #prequels t-shirt, speaking of Force Center. This is all those folks who really thought deeply about that film specifically, and I mean Attack of the Clones to some extent too, but it took the time to do that. And I think Lucasfilm is worried. One of the things that maybe I'm concerned with all the films is, we talk about Rogue One, that first act just flies by, zoom, zoom, zoom. And it's okay because we know it's going to be original trilogy. It's going to be A New Hope. It's going to lead up. We know that the story is, but, both Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker didn't have the time to do that. And so, Last Jedi was maybe a little more prequel, and Rise of Skywalker, of course, was more original trilogy. If I can use that, you know what I'm getting at there. Prequel at the height of their powers, Darth Sidious from the Empire wiped them out. Why is my hero Luke?
I'll say Force Awakens. I'm going to give some leeway to Rise of Skywalker. I felt that was more prequel in a weird way.
But sure, it has its, especially in the first act with that. Mm-hmm. But my point being, a film just doesn't have the time to work on people, and this is a problem specific to Star Wars. This is not a problem specific to Star Trek or Game of Thrones or whatever. Star Trek could make their 4th movie, and I think people would get what's happening. And so, that's another reason. It's one of the reasons why I think they're just saying, okay, we also don't have the money, we don't have the resources, or if we have the money, we're just focusing it on the safer bet of the thing that gives us enough time. Andor is going to be the longest thing yet. I mean, those 12 episodes, not counting the animated shows, is going to be among the live action. It's going to be the longest thing we've gotten, longest single Star Wars story live action we've gotten. You think about it, it's going to be 24 episodes, and who knows how long those will be. But that's my thing. So I think we need to take all that news, like I took that news of, okay, Rogue Squadron's off the schedule. With of course it is. That Lucasfilm is not really focusing on films. You should start calling them Lucas shows. Sorry. Right. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. I've gone on a long time about that. Doc, do you have any thoughts on that to add?
Not really. Just as long as it stays good and it stays varied and consistent, like I'm cool with that. Just make sure, and there is such thing as too much of a good thing. I think what ultimately matters is that they do different and unique things with each thing they put out. If they start to tackle the similar things and try to go for similar tones, I think it is going to start to feel a bit exhausting. But as long as they keep them varied and keep them unique, I think they can make sure that Star Wars as a franchise just stays varied and stays creative and doesn't fall into just doing the same things over and over again, which an issue I've kind of had with Mandalorian at points. And I hope that that they focus more on bringing new things and new ideas and just keeping the franchise more varied and more unique with each new
fresh. Yeah.
Okay. I'll add a few sets. Well, they are doing a movie just called Indiana Jones, which is happening, and it's way in production. So,
but it's not Star Wars. It doesn't have the same problem Star Wars has. Anyway, go ahead.
But Lucasfilm is still making films, just not Star Wars films right now. But I think with the Disney Plus shows as well, something that they don't have to worry about is they don't have to necessarily worry about wide audiences. They just have to worry about demographics. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say judge like who likes what. Anyone can like anything, really. But as I've said before, Andor is kind of being marketed as here's Star Wars for grown-ups. You're going to like this. Maybe your 5-year-old or 8-year-old probably won't. Mandalorian's a little bit more of a wider audience. Probably more like, kind of like people like action movies and kind of more, kind of fun Kenner toys things. Obviously, Kenobi is for everyone who loved the prequels and wanted more of that. Or just loves Ewan McGregor in the role. So, the demographics of that are different. So I think that's as long as sort of like every show kind of, again, aims for some different demographic, aims for different tone. Obviously adds new stuff too. But, it's like, I don't know what Acolyte's going to feel like. Acolyte might not appeal to everybody, within reason. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think that's definitely something the movies have trouble doing because the movies kind of have to appeal to everybody. So maybe they're looking for whatever the next wide appeal thing is. And they said no movies until before 2024. So, if I'm looking for a movie, I still think 2025 is like the best bet. Unless that's something, unless Taika falls through or whatever. I'm sure they wanted to do Rogue Squadron, but for whatever reason, that didn't work out. So, my guess, maybe 2025 with Taika. Who knows? But I think that's sort of the advantage of Disney Plus series right now.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, the advantage I think you're talking about is the money, right? The subscription is the same. I am paying however much I'm paying per year. You're paying however much you're paying per year. Whatever you end up watching, if you watch National Geographic, you watch. I get Hulu folded into my Disney Plus, and then I got all Marvel and Star Wars. It's all the same price. Whereas a film, it's I gotta pay $12.99 Canadian to go see this film. I gotta pay this one time. It's a much bigger gamble, and so you're right. They have to. It does have that wider appeal. It might have that lower common denominator approach that. I still wonder if Force Awakens, I mean, that it succeeded. It had to do that. But, as a strategy long term, they haven't. It doesn't seem, thankfully. And this thing, I'm glad that they're doing this focus. I'm glad. Like Doc, you're saying, it makes for more diverse Star Wars. Makes for a wider buffet because, again, the economics of it allow for that. Again, it'll be nice. We can have our cake and eat it too a little bit in those theatrical events. It'd be nice if, for some reason, Marvel is still able to cash in on actually having its cake and eating it too with 4 films and 4 series a year. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just unfair to compare to Marvel now. I don't know. They are the juggernaut. They're the champion, and Lucasfilm. Just got to do what you're doing. just keep on chugging along. All right. Speaking of chugging along, we're going to chug along one last little bit on this week. I did the math. There is 31 hours, less than 39 hours until the Andor 3-episode premiere. We've touched on Andor a little bit. Doc, how are you feeling just on Andor on this 3-episode premiere on the whole show as it's coming up?
I've been waiting for this show since the movie turned 6 years old this very year.
Right.
And I'm very, very, very excited. Just the idea of exploring the rebellion more, getting more into the nitty gritty of how it started out. Because, Rebels is kind of the rebellion origin story in a way, but it's through the lens of the Ghost Crew. Whereas this show is going to be focusing explicitly on Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera and the big people who got the rebellion going in the first place. So we're really going to see the groundwork for that get laid in this show. So that's the big thing I'm excited about. Also, just getting more of a political drama in Star Wars, focusing more on like the street level, like just people rising up against the Empire, the first acts of rebellion, getting to see Cassian's early life, fleshing out his character, getting to see how he comes to be who he is by the time of Rogue One. And yeah, it's just going to be really fun to see. 24 episodes overall across this entire show. It's going to be really fun getting 12 episodes this year, probably 12 episodes next year. I'm excited to see. This really feels like a passion project on Lucasfilm's part. This feels like a story they really want to do and something they've been excited to do for a long time. And I can't wait to see what they've got for us.
Joel, are you okay? 31 hours. Are you okay?
I can make it. I can make it. I agree with everything Doc has said. Fun fact, we just watched Rogue Squadron together, he and I. I'm not sure if that's on his Rogue One.
That'd be amazing if you saw Rogue Squadron.
No, we went to the future. We went to an alternate dimension. We saw Rogue One on his channel. I'm not sure if that commentary's up yet.
It literally just dropped like 20 minutes ago.
Nice.
Okay, great. And it's cool to we watch that movie and kind of just get like Rogue One, the 12 episode season and 2 seasons of 12 episodes, like an extension of that. So that's awesome. Dr. Wright, Rebels was also kind of the rebellion origin story, but I think more from the micro level, just to go through. Here's the more big macro level. Like we got Mothma, the Senate, Saw, we might see Palpatine. We got the Imperial Senate, the Senate, and the Imperial Senate. And it's all through the lens of Cassian Andor, as I like to call him. And so, this is. I would almost argue that, and it's interesting. I know I keep pushing back our book review, but Rogue One, probably outside of maybe The Last Jedi, probably the most influential of the Star Wars films we've gotten in the Disney era. I would probably say Rogue One, Last Jedi, Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, and Solo. Poor Solo.
That's fair.
But in terms of just their effects on both the canon, but also out of universe as well, and kind of how much has sort of that movie has sort of sprinkled its way through everything from Jedi Fallen Order, Kenobi, Mandalorian, be it stuff from in the universe or the fact that the cinematographers have worked on The Mandalorian season 1, I believe. So there's that, and this is kind of the experiment I've been wanting to see. Kind of, I've been saying Kenobi and Andor are going to take Disney Plus shows to the next level. I think Kenobi did that in a smaller sense from the story writing perspective. I think Andor is going to do that all around. I'm kind of curious to see. This is the show that's trying to be more than just Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it's exciting, and I'm so excited to see people's reactions. So excited to talk about it. I've been waiting for this, since the film was 6 years old. Not since I was 6 years old, but yeah. I can't wait. But Matthew, what about you?
Mon Mothma, the Senate, give it to me. That's specifically, the thing I'm looking forward to most, but also radical protest politics. The plight of immigrants and refugees being displaced and want facing a system that is not for them, and hearing that voice. Yes, I have this voice in my head saying, royal funeral, everything, everything that's meaningful there for me at least, but also a lot of people displaced, a lot of people abused and oppressed by imperial systems, and
which is very relevant this year.
Yeah, and so bringing the two together somehow might be a good Mon Mothma story, but in this for Andor, just reach out for. I want Star Wars. Think about Last Jedi, right? It reached beyond the screen and whacked us in the face a little bit. I like being preached to. I'm kind of a glutton for that, but looking forward to Andor preaching to us. So yeah, keep your eye on on here on Ion Canon, all over the Star Wars Underworld network. Keep your eye on the Underworld Network. See what I did there. For all of our Andor coverage, we're definitely going to have we're definitely going to be talking about that here on Ion Canon. Going to bring it back up the Eyes on Screen segment as well. I know the flagship Star Wars Underworld is going to talk about it. I'm sure Tales Beyond the Galaxy and the whole host of podcasts here at the Underworld Network are going to dive into this show because it's going to be the main event in Star Wars. So looking forward to that. Again, 30 and a half hours. 30 and a half hours. I can do math, guys.
You can do math.
Also, I just want to say I'm glad that they pushed back Bad Batch Season 2 to January because I was very scared that the rumors that it was going to air alongside Andor were true because, like, Bad Batch was going to get buried by Andor if that happened. Like the Star Wars fans like us, we would watch both, but the vast majority of like casual people who watch Disney Plus, if they saw, do you want to watch Andor or Bad Batch, everyone was going to click on Andor.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that Bad Batch is going to get a chance to stand on its own and not be buried by another thing.
And also, even that they moved Andor. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it was going to be a month ago or so. This flew by, and I'm. Again, we're on the eve of it. I don't need to tell you the number anymore. I told it 3 times, but we're on the eve of it, and it's here, it's coming, and they took time to get it right. So there you go, 31 hours to go. All right, so our main topic. Let's get this. I'll do that there. The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis. Yes, Doc, you've got it. I got the poster right there.
I have an audiobook on my computer. So.
Yes, I got an audiobook on my phone. But yeah, I think I got you. It's the reverse of the poster, the Shadow of the Sith poster that Adam Christopher signed. I got that celebration at the Del Rey booth right there. Happened to be right there. Right there just when Adam Christopher was signing. So I should have just put that up when. Anyway, I'm getting my life in order here after celebration 4 months later. Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis. We gave this a listen to, Joel and I. Doc, I don't know if you give this a listen to or a read, but before we dive into
I read it, and I like to do the voices myself while I read it. So
yes, very good. So Joel, then I'll set this up, and then I'll throw this to you because this is the first audiobook I've done in a while, and so I can actually talk about this aspect of it in the media and the audiobook production. They tried to do something different with this. They tried to do, they used 2 voices, had both Saskia Marleveld and Mark the Canon Legend Thompson. Of course, Saskia Marleveld doing the Leia chapters, both her dialogue and everyone else's dialogue and narration. And then Mark Thompson doing the Han Solo, the dialogue and other characters and narration. So it was partway between a standard audiobook and an audio play, especially that really came forward that last chapter with both voices. And I'll just say, well, Joel, I'll throw this to you first. Do you think that worked, or do you think that what's the word, drew back, took away from the production, from the storytelling?
I liked it overall, honestly. I thought it was interesting, especially if the book itself was going to be Han, Leia. Then I thought, do something a little unique with the audio. It's like, have Mark Thompson do, his usual thing, and then have this other person do Leia's chapters. I liked it. I'm always a sucker for Mark Thompson myself because he's kind of the definitive Star Wars audio book person in general, and I have a lot of them. Like I used to say, oh, they should have gotten him for Thrawn because I'm so used to his Thrawn voice.
He does great. He does great. Yeah.
Especially if you ever listen to the classic Heir of the Empire, before Lord Mickelson did his own rendition. But I love Lord Mickelson. Don't get me wrong, great. So I used to do that. But no, I thought it was fun. I thought it was cute. So yeah, I had no real problems with it inherently.
Yeah, I mean, I found it was effective in conveying the feeling, getting us into the different minds of the 2 characters. The one part that kind of threw me off is when you'd have a second character, say the Prime Minister, or even Mon Mothma, I think, to some extent, but or I like that the Imperial agent that comes in kind of partway through, or more than partway through. We'll get to her in later in the show. When we get introduced, or like those side cast of characters on the ship.
Yeah.
that kind of was just odd when you'd have, okay, you get used to them with one voice and then it's a different voice. But I mean, again, that's I guess the cost of trying this thing out that's new. Again, overall effective. I don't know if they I mean, this book really lent it to that. I mean, just the way it was structured, the way it was very much. I mean, I wonder if Beth Revis had that in mind a little bit, or the folks in the story group had that in mind. So, yeah, it mostly worked. But yeah, I would have rather they go full bore. I know it costs more money, but the actual audio plays that they've put out, the full blown, the Dooku Jedi Lost, the Dr. Aphra, and the Lorna D audio plays, those were fantastic. So
the audiobooks more or less always have one narrator and they have the music cue. So I feel like if you just like listen to, I don't know, Alphabet Squadron or even Shadow of the Sith on audio, I think you probably maybe have a better experience because they're practically audio plays just with the actual narration part.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. So. And I mean, both in terms of the actual performers. I mean, again, Mark, like you mentioned with Mark the Canon, Legend Thompson, Saskia Marlavelle doing fantastic with Leia. I mean, what I found with both of them do a really great job of narrating the emotions of the character the point of view character. That's what Mark Thompson does, almost better than the voices themselves. You feel what the character feels that they're observing something happening. So, always glad to hear his voice. The soundtrack mostly was fine. I think so. There were some moments where I thought it was just an odd choice, like the Jedi theme when Leia's musing about her origins with Vader, and different things that kind of took me out of it. But I mean, that's a hard job to do. Also, is to pick all those soundtracks. So I don't know, Joel, if you have any thoughts on the soundtrack, the score. Taking John Williams themes.
I'm just kind of used to a Star Wars audiobook, kind of just doing that. Like, like when reading the sequel trilogy, watching the sequel trilogy novelization, it's like I don't know, something from A New Hope in there, where it's like this is where a sequel trilogy cue. It's like they never put sequel trilogy cues; they would just go to prequel. Yeah. Although you probably hear more prequel music in the sequel trilogy era that way, so there you go.
That's possible. Yeah.
But that's just something he's kind of used to that at this point. Like, do a little stage when Kylo and Rey are fighting.
I wanted that in Rise of Skywalker, frankly.
so there you go. You get that in the novelization.
I should check that out.
I actually don't know. I'm just making it up, but
okay, that'll be really. I mean, I'm sure there's somewhere on YouTube. After this, when we're done here, go on to YouTube and we'll do the fake Rey and Kylo Ren. I'm sure it's there. So, okay, so now talk about the general thoughts, general feelings. Doc, I'll throw this to you again as our guest. First of all, the without necessarily going into too much detail, but maybe touch on a few things if you want. Overall thoughts on Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis.
This is in my top 10 favorite Star Wars novels. Period.
High praise.
I thought this was a very, very good read. I was very, very happy with how Beth Revis told the story. I was very pleased with how Han and Leia and everyone else were written. This really felt like a novel that could have come out like after Return of the Jedi. Like, I mean, obviously there are certain things that get referenced here that weren't part of the canon at the time, but just in terms of the style of writing and how the characters are written, it really felt classic Star Wars to me, this whole book. Personally, I think this is a really good middle part of what I like to call the Leia novel trilogy. For me, that trilogy is Leia, Princess of Alderaan, this book, and Bloodline. For me, those three books are like a really solid Leia trilogy because like each of those books talks about a different point of Leia's life, getting into her head, how she's dealing with certain things. With Leia, Prince of Alderaan, we're talking about her childhood, her early life in Alderaan. With this book, we see a relationship with Han and the rebellion and how she's dealing with the Empire being gone. And in Bloodline, we see, the beginnings of the sequel trilogy. And I think each of those books does such a good job of showing how Leia deals with these different aspects of her life and these different points in her life and how she's dealing with that and the rest of the galaxy as a whole. For me, this is probably my favorite portrayal of Leia and Han's relationship in any Star Wars media. I thought they were absolutely fantastic and adorable in this. I loved all their little interactions. I love how, I love how smitten Han is with Leia, but he's still trying to play the cool guy, but it's failing. And I love how Leia is still dedicated to her job, even though she's also trying to relax and enjoy her honeymoon. I love the wedding with the Ewoks. I thought it was so fun and so very fitting for the Ewoks and for Leia and Han as well. I love all the little. I love my favorite parts of the book are when we get into Leia's head and her feelings towards Vader. I thought that stuff was brilliant. She doesn't accept Vader as her father. She doesn't even want to consider him her family. She's having trouble seeing what Luke sees in him. I think that's really cool that they address that here. And she doesn't, even when she thinks about her Force sensitivity, she doesn't want to think about in terms of her father. She just thinks about in terms of herself and how she thinks about the Force and what she wants to use it for. And getting into just the general state of the galaxy and the rebellion, like I like that they're trying to. I like that they have to like put forth the idea like the Empire is really gone. Please believe us on this, because a lot of people still don't believe the Empire is gone.
Yeah,
a lot of people are like the Empire is not like people don't even know the Emperor is dead. Dead, but I like that they have to also like put on a good show for the public while they're on their honeymoon. I think that's really fun. The stuff on Mandurs was really cool. I thought it was a cool location. I like the whole thing with like the ice architecture and the ice artwork. I thought that was a cool idea. Also plays to the themes of the book of like nothing lasts forever. Like the artwork on the planet, it melts eventually, so you got to keep replacing it. And also that cool little villain reveal near the end of a character who I never expected to come back from an earlier book. That was fun. And just a very, very good read. Very fun. And I'm just glad that Han and Leia finally got their wedding. And
putting Beth Revis alongside the Master Claudia Gray, that's high praise and deserved praise. I will say that's a great point. A Leia trilogy, especially given how there are connections to Princess of Alderaan and Bloodline. Joel, general thoughts, go for it.
Yeah, I actually never thought about it being like a Leia trilogy, but I actually think that's a good point. I liked it. I wouldn't put it in my top 10. I think I like the first act probably the most, and it kind of loses me a little bit. But that first act is really strong. I just love everything on Endor, and kind of seeing the wedding actually take place. As Doc said, I love seeing Leia deal with Vader being her father. I love actually seeing the fact that as much as she kind of denies it, I think Leia is very much like her father. There's lots of moments where she sort of jumps the gun and kind of almost creates her own. I don't want to say creates her own downfall, but kind of like creates a situation where it's like you're trying to prevent something so hard you accidentally caused it by mistake.
Like Obi-Wan says, you are passionate like your father.
Yeah.
Yes. Like seeing the state of the galaxy. People thinking the Empire is gone. When clearly it's not gone. We got a whole aftermath trilogy to say, nope, still here and still doing stuff. The Halcyon stuff was fine. I love Han in this. He's a supportive husband, and just always trying to be good, best play as possible. But yeah, overall, a pretty good addition to the post-Endor to Jakku era of, Star Wars storytelling. And good job on Beth Revis, who I really like. I especially loved her Rebel Rising book, which is definitely one of my favorites. Again, it has a really strong first act.
Yeah, I'll say this book was very well written. It was very well. Beth Revis's command of the language and ability again to, just even in the text itself, to get it to switch between the two characters, to get into what they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and what they're doing, and how on the ship, especially, they go off into different directions, and how it ends up meeting up at the end. That was really well plotted out and planned out and structured. Joel, I'll agree with you. At the first part was really great. The first part was really great. Everything on Endor, especially with Mon and Leia, which we'll get to that in a second. But then it kind of lulled. Like, why are we getting this description of this animal? Why are we getting all these details? We got there later, but it wasn't so sure. Maybe that's the issue with the audiobook and having to concentrate on that. And so maybe on paper it would have been better. But yeah, sorry, we're gonna. Okay, well, we're good. Just making sure everything's okay on our end. There we go. Okay. But yeah, I Doc, that theme of art and nothing lasts forever, and preserving the good at where it is and where it's at in the moment. That was and very, very poetic and very well portrayed, as we'll see with Leia, with Leia's own story. Interestingly, and we'll get to one of these in a second, but two things we haven't really mentioned much of is the Halcyon and how we were all worried that was this going to be just an ad for Galactic Star Cruiser. It really wasn't. They really did a good job of letting the setting serve the story, and I'm sure some things are, oh yeah, you get to see this thing, you get to see that. I mean, the I guess the Will Sliney comic probably does more about that, but just like I probably should give Black Spire a read also, just for the similar reason. The Will Sliney comic with Galaxy's Edge does that as well. Again, not, and partly because that's visual, and so it also doesn't. The bulk of the story doesn't take place on the Halcyon. It takes place on this Maduras, which I hope Galactic Star Cruiser doesn't actually dump anyone on, because they'll be north of here. It's colder north of here. Definitely not in Florida. It's not like that. So I enjoyed it. Again, I won't say this was my top 10, but top 15. I'll give top 15. There were some parts where were really compelling. And let's dive into some aspects of that. Let's start with that, especially that first little chunk there. Big picture with. So you want to go ahead, Joel?
Oh yeah. I just wanted to also mention. I noticed it wasn't in the notes, but I also feel like we should set aside a little time to talk about. Oh, I guess Doc might be having his technical difficulties after all. Text about the one and only Luke Skywalker. Oh, yes. That's good.
Yeah. I added a little bit in the notes about Luke in a bit, but.
Okay, yeah, but the big picture.
So let me. I'll set that up and we'll dive in there. So, the big picture with Leia and Ron's politics and all the conversations with the burgeoning. Is it the Rebel Alliance? Is it the New Republic? Really fascinating conversations about the need to secure allies and prospective members of the New Republic, and the need to show military strength, but also diplomatic endeavors and approaches. Leia herself, and again, we'll go into Leia's character, needing to transition between being a soldier and being a diplomat. Also, part of that needing secure prospective members, they need to secure resources and fuel. We talk about Lando, and it was about the mobile video game coming back and giving those references to that in this era of trying to retake Bespin or Cloud City. Of course, in the Chuck Wendig interludes, we see that, but the push for that, and of course Lando having his own kind of interests, but it's a serious concern, right? You need to fuel these ships, you need to fuel these cities, especially if there's going to be lots of civilians. There needs to be resources, and so need to secure these resources quick and soon. I think the most fascinating underlying thing, Doc, you mentioned the connections to Bloodline, and I think you alluded to Operation Cinder. That there's the first stirrings of it. There is, why doesn't, is it Beck, that's her name? Why doesn't she get pulled over, or why does she get called out? Or rather, I think it's why do all the troops in the Imperial Tower, why are they being evacuated? Probably to be massing on Jakku, because everything's starting to be set in motion for Operation Cinder. Again, I mean, paper cannon connections. I'm here for it. I love it. And Beth Revis doing, again, a great job of not bashing us over the head with it, but saying, yes, this is what's happening right now. This is what's starting to happen. We know from the Battlefront 2 campaign that immediately these things in the Shadowed Empire comic, immediately, the Emperor is dead. So things get triggered and set into motion. Lastly, and this is the question I'll throw to you guys, but you can also, of course, comment on anything I've said here. you guys mentioned how this question of the war is over, the Emperor is dead, Palpatine's dead, so the war must be over, right? Not so much. And like Chuck Wendig saying, the regimes don't just change overnight. Wars don't just end overnight. It can take about a year, or in Legends, it takes a couple decades, right, for the regime to change over. So, two questions, Joel. I'll start with you with both of these. What did you think of the overall big political picture, especially that gets set up on Endor, and then later a bit on Madurs, and the belief that the war is over since the Emperor is dead? Is that naive? Is it realistic, or is it just propaganda?
I think this might be a little bit of a criticism, or just even not even a criticism, just kind of an interesting choice. I do think it's a little naive on Leia's part. I mean, it's kind of the robot chicken joke of like, like the Emperor's dead, but like we have millions of star systems and troops and no, they killed the Emperor, you see, and Vader, so the war's over, Empire dead. But we have all these, I don't know. I always feel like it's a little weird, I guess. Maybe, I mean, that Leia, or maybe just Leia's very gun ho about it, like the Emperor's dead, yay. But
I mean, the Nazis again, the part when Hitler died.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Although to be fair, the Soviets and the Americans pretty much had no terror. Pretty much had Berlin circled. So, but no, I mean, I think there's definitely regimes that like when someone dies, it's like they collapse like that. So I'm always willing to give it a little bit more of a leeway of like, yeah, the Empire's always been a house of cards just ready to tumble. And it took a Death Star and another Death Star to really watch it all go downhill. But I just think it's a little naive to think later to think, oh yeah, like all the Star Destroyers and the troopers, they're all just gonna pack up and go home. And obviously, I think Mon Mothma kind of realizes that a little bit. But I do think maybe Leia's feeling a little too optimistic of the fact that the Empire's dead. It's all over. When it's like, oh no, it's not. The Empire still has resources, even if it's even if it's breaking up into warlordisms. There's still a somewhat central command trying to pull together what's left, as we see in the Aftermath and Alphabet Squadron. In that regard, so it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, Mon Mothma certainly has that urgency of we need to actually take action. John, if you had any more to say that, or I can throw it to Doc.
Oh no, throw it to Doc. I think.
Yeah, so Doc, what do you think of that question about the Empire? Is the Empire over, or the war is over because the Emperor is dead? Naive, realistic, or propaganda? And then what do you think of the politics generally in this book, the galactic politics?
I think on one hand, you just want to give the people hope, like, yeah, like we won Endor, so we've taken the Emperor and Vader out of action, so like you want to celebrate that, and you want people to know that they just did a big thing, but at the same time, you don't want to get complacent and feel like, okay, like the Empire is like never going to come back. Like clearly that isn't true. Still out there, still doing their thing, and so it's a difficult balancing act. You want to let people know that this is a major victory, and like we did accomplish something great, but at the same time, that threat isn't going to go away forever, and there's going to be future things to deal with. And specifically with Mon Mothma's standpoint is that she wants to get the message out there that the Emperor did die over Endor, and she wants people to know that. And like, there are still people denying it. There are still people, like we see on the Halcyon, there are people who like, I heard that was just like those were just like rebels like making shit up, and like there are a lot of people who are still skeptical about it. Like, did the Emperor really die? Like, is it really gone? And he's going to return somehow later, but that doesn't get addressed in this book. But at the end of the day, I think it's all about hope, and like what Star Wars is about. And like, you want people to hope that like, yeah, like we won a major victory against the Empire, so they are vulnerable. But at the same time, you don't want them to become so fixated on like the Empire being beaten that they forget like we still got work to do, and we still got plans to liberate. The Empire's still out there. Like, they're still planning things. They're still coalescing. They're still bringing people in for like further operations. They've still got plans, and we got to be ready for that. So it's a difficult balancing act to pull off there, and we see that with this book with Mon Mothma trying to be like, just try to put on a make it look like you're on a good honeymoon with your husband. Show the galaxy that we're doing good now. Like things are starting to get better. And the Leia's kind of skeptical about it, and we see her frustration with people on the Halcyon who are like people who are working with the Empire, like that Kilad dude who plots to kidnap Leia and then fails. There are people who worked with the Empire and who are out of a job now, and they don't like the Empire, but at the same time they didn't have anything else to support them financially. So getting to see that stuff and like the different reactions to the Empire being gone among the people who even believe that the Empire is defeated, really cool that we're getting to see those perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, to answer my own question, I mean, it's interesting that in the narration, Leia is clearly a little disappointed and kind of concerned people aren't believing her, and like, why don't you believe me? Yeah, like you said, please believe us. The Emperor's dead. You gotta say, Mon Mothma definitely milking it for all it's worth, as she should. It's the big PR coup and having her mind on the PR coup, and the fact that that they go into that in this book. I kind of wonder if Beth Revis got some production notes from Andor, at least in terms of Mon's character, if there's going to be some sort of connection, at least in Mon's ability to score the diplomatic hit. And
she had to have gotten notes regarding Obi-Wan, because Leia does mention Lola in the first few chapters, which is really cool. I love that little shout out there.
So,
go ahead. I was going to say, I think one thing that we have to keep in mind about the Battle of Endor, this is opposite of the Battle of Exegol, which I think is what they were trying to go for in that movie. Endor was not the galaxy rising up against the Empire, and it's like, no, we're done with you. It's like, no, it's like the galaxy was just kind of sitting on the sideline doing its thing. It's like Endor was kind of this trap and this last-ditch effort by the rebellion. It's like, oh no, they got another Death Star. We got to blow this up. Remember, it's not like the galaxy was in total uprising. The Emperor seemed pretty secure in his little throne. He got his Death Star coming. The Emperor was like, I'm going to finally get rid of the rebellion once and for all. And then obviously his overconfidence was his weakness. He dies, and then the Death Star exploded, and sort of like everyone's like, oh shoot, didn't expect that to happen. So like the galaxy wasn't really prepared for this. The Empire wasn't prepared. The Empire wasn't prepared for this, but the Empire didn't. It wasn't, the Battle of Endor didn't happen amidst a massive uprising. Right. It happened kind of like, oh dang, it's like now all these stormtroopers, like, what do we do? It's like we stay, we fight chaos. Because again, it wasn't the Coruscant was still pretty secure at the time, and the Emperor had all those bases and stuff. So it's like everyone was kind of shocked this happened.
Yeah, I mean, even see on Iden Versio's face, right? She's looking up and she sees it explode, and this actually happened. Wow, I can't believe it. Again, I can't believe it happened again. Jakku is more like Exegol, right? It is this a big, en masse, this large fleet of, I mean, in this case, it is the New Republic fleet finally mobilizing to take out the remnants of the Empire. Yeah, that's a great point. We just think Endor is the big climax because since 1983, that was the end of the trilogy, the end of the story, happily ever after. Everything, every story from Truce of Bakura all the way until Princess and the Scoundrel, trying to articulate what's the next step. And one of the things they had to deal with is this guy Han. And we'll go into the dynamic between Leia and Han at the end, because that is the heart of the story. But we'll talk about Han the Scoundrel, and that's one of the things I mentioned. We didn't talk about in our introduction we didn't talk about the Halcyon and Galactic Star Cruiser. We also didn't really talk much about Han. He kind of gets lost in the shuffle, at least early on, and he isn't between the two of them. He isn't the stronger character, and that's not necessarily a knock on him. He isn't maybe the most dynamic or interesting character to maybe just the three of us. I don't know. Especially earlier on, his motivations, maybe they pale in contrast to Leia's wider view. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that the romantic motivations aren't as interesting as Leia's diplomatic, political, military motivations. She's so committed to her job. I don't know if that's true for either of you, but yeah, and I think that's part of what could have driven the story forward more clearly, is if Han's motivations were a little more compelling. I will say though, as the book goes on, and it provides this opportunity to explore. Hold on a second. From his point of view, he was just on Cloud City. He was just frozen, and then he was just freed by Leia, and from everyone's point of view, was just freed by Leia, and then the victory at Endor. It's incredibly fast, and we feel it's been a long time. For him, it's been just a few weeks since Bespin. Frankly, if his conscious, we don't know, but he's been asleep effectively.
Although he does mention at one point that Leia did tell him about Kira taking him, and
sure, and so like those things get filled in, but in his experience of time, it's very fast and probably genuinely traumatic, and the way it explores. The way the book explores just the cold, dry cold, being stuck up in carbonite. Here's Han Solo, the scoundrel, likes to explore and get out and get into trouble, and here he is cooped up in this box, this slab, and can't go anywhere. And even if he isn't conscious, there's probably something even in his own body that is incredibly destabilizing and traumatizing. And so that got interesting, got better later on. At first it's kind of this weird, he's just grizzly and grumpy, but definitely much more of a softie comes out, and I appreciate probably going through this experience. He's going through processing with Leia, with everything on Madur's, processing his own pain and suffering at this experience of being in carbonite, and then coming out and not being able to be the hero, because Luke and Leia are the heroes, really. I mean, Han's involved on Endor, but not so much. And then Doc, as you mentioned, Beck from Smuggler's Run by Greg Rucka, which I admit I haven't read, but thanks to the Wikipedia for telling me, that was a great moment in the audiobook where just all out of the blue, this high-pitched voice, I forget the line, but coming in, stepping onto the scene. That's another common theme with Han, is his past catches up to him, his past as a smuggler, troublemaker, ruffian, whatever, now trying to do good by Leia and the rebellion and the galaxy catches up to him. So that's Han's character. Doc, of all those things, in terms of especially with the way it explores his experience from Cloud City onward, and everything with Beck and Smuggler's Run and whatnot. What did you think of Han's character?
I loved Han in this. He was really fun. I loved his he just wants to spend time with his wife, and the galaxy keeps pulling him away from that. He just wants to spend time with the person he loves. He's sick of the war. He's sick of all the fighting and the spying and everything. He just wants to settle down and just take a break for once in his life. But he can't, because the galaxy will always be in turmoil. It is a Star Wars is like Star Wars. There's always going to be war. There's always going to be things to deal with. Even when he's just relaxing on the Halcyon, he runs into a guy who openly says he's going to try to kidnap his wife, and he has to deal with that. And just all this little things, and they try to go to the Ice Moon Madurs. They try to settle down there, but the Empire is stationed there. Oh, and there's this Alicia Beck lady who tried to kill him back during the Galactic Civil War. So he's got to deal with that now, and all this stuff. And Han is a guy who is constantly trying to just live his life, but his life won't let him. And he's just so caught up in all of his mistakes and all of his past actions and all the people he's scorned and all the people he's stabbed in the back and all the people he's just left by the wayside. And they all come back to haunt him and Leia. And I like that despite all of that, he still tries to just do his best to make Leia happy and to show her that we can relax. We can take a break. We don't have to constantly be working for the rebellion. We don't have to constantly be working at PR or like, stopping the Empire or investigating insurgencies or any of that stuff. And of course, Leia is always going to be obligated to that. But at the same time, Han has to help her remember that she's still a person and she can still enjoy life. She can still, have fun. She doesn't have to be constantly looking behind her back the entire time. But Leia is also there to remind Han that sometimes you need to take action. Sometimes you need to get back in the game. So like Han and Leia really balance each other out in that kind of way. Like they remind each other that there's more to life than what they're each currently doing. And it's really cool that we get to see that relationship flourish so much, especially with Han just trying his damnedest to just make a good impression on the galaxy as like Leia's husband, but he's Han, so we can't do that. And just very fun, and like the way Lando and Chewie are constantly prodding at him and like trying to get him to just change up his image and like look the part, and he's failing at it at every single turn. And just
wear a suit to his wedding.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah. I mean, so you said two things there, Doc. You said he wants to live his life, wants to settle down and relax. Joel asked this question, is that a change in his character, at least in terms of wanting to settle down and relax? Because previously living his life meant smuggling, being on the run, getting into trouble, being the scoundrel. Is that a change, or do you see more consistency with his character from before?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the appeal of Han Solo has always been he's the everyman in the wacky universe. He is the guy who's like, he sees the Force and sees all the Jedi cosmic stuff, and he's the guy who'll go, well, that's just weird. That's kind of, and I think that's what makes the appeal of Star Wars so fun. Yeah. It's like, you got all this cosmic stuff. Then you got that one guy who's like, well, what the heck is all this nonsense? He's the audience speaking, like, what is all this? And I think for Han, I think in a sense, he's a simple guy who wants simple things. And I think now that he's found out that, he can have love and family and friends, and has sort of shed off the selfishness that he sort of built over the years. And if we believe if we take Solo the movie into account, he has once again become, as Kira said, you're the good guy. You're the good guy. You're the good man. I forget what she says. Good guy.
You're the good guy. Yeah.
You're the good guy. Which I think is sort of the idea of like Han's always in deep down is a good guy who just, he just sort of got beaten down. Then yeah, you start like, maybe starts thinking more than just adventured with his buddy Chewie. He might sit down, have a kid, little Han Jr. And I think that's always sort of been Han. Is sort of he kind of comes that thing. He understands. And he learns to understand the bigger picture, like, the Force, all of it. I've always said my favorite version of Han Solo is Force Awakens Han Solo. I think that is the natural conclusion to his arc as a character. But even when he comes about doing, like, the Force, the Jedi, Resistance, all of it, at the end of the day, he's just all about wanting to get Ben back to the good side and save his soul, regardless of, kind of the bigger picture. So I think it's evolution, but it's at the core of Han Solo is just an average guy, and the good guy with very basic morals. Well, maybe not even morals, but just sort of like, you gotta get at the end of the day, kind of like, oh, forget the complicated mumbo jumbo. This is just how it is. Just like this simple.
Yeah,
math is math.
Math is math. Yeah, it's interesting. And 30 hours to go into Andor. Just putting that out there. It's interesting. Yeah, Kira is able to peer into his soul and see he's the good guy. It's buried under all his experiences on Corellia and all his experiences with Beckett and then with Jabba, and then being in this case of carbonite, he doesn't have to fight anymore, and he stops fighting and starts loving and living, and then he goes back to fighting, and we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, I wonder if it's a way of saying, the best way of putting it is that soft core was always there, it just needed to be excavated, and it gets excavated through experiences. And this brings us to the principal scalpel chisel of Han's life, but the main character of this book in her own right, as we've mentioned, the princess, the general, and the Jedi, Leia Organa Solo Skywalker. We see, I mean, this is very consistent. The way Beth Revis writes her, I think, is very consistent with everything we've seen, and because Leia is such a consistent character, very strong and soft at the same time, so focused on her job that she needed Mon to convince her that the Halcyon trip had political implications, and it wasn't just a private honeymoon that you can take your time off because you're not really taking time off. And that, I mean, that's definitely played as a character weakness for Leia that Han has to point out, has to name. But then, I mean, in terms of both, this adventure on Majora's does show both. It shows strong and soft. It shows the political and the personal. I mean, to hearken to the great feminist slogan, the personal is political. Leia embodies that in such profound ways. Leia embodies that in such profound ways, that externally, and talking about what is the sustainable way forward for the galaxy. Clearly the Empire is now gone, it's fractured. Here's the Republic come to rebuild. Leia's life isn't gone, it's just changed in these profound ways through the rebellion. And so, externally, through seeing, like we talked about with art and with the relationship with the planet and its species, seeing Yen's delicate handling, the Prime Minister's his delicate handling of the Imperial presence and subtle resistance, and how that the development of society and culture beyond the war is what I'm getting. What comes after the war is building societies and cultures, including art. And I think she has a renewed appreciation for art and the capability of art, not in a very Thrawn way. Thrawn is trying to study art to learn how to destroy people. Appropriate. Yeah. She's trying to learn how art builds people up and connects them to their past and to their present. And then I think the most important, most interesting thing that happens in this book, internally, and the way she, like I said, a Jedi, she connects with the Force. A moment that's very reminiscent of Ezra and the Purrgil, not Ezra Miller, Ezra Bridger and the Purrgil. But I think a different angle. But I think I think this is actually closer to Rey in the rocks. Not just lifting rocks, I think, and especially the way the Last Jedi novelization talks about submitting. We even hear Leia with echoes of that narration. I forget who wrote the novelization, but I mean, Rian Johnson, the film, brings it out beautifully. Of submitting to the will of the Force and decentering herself and finding that life, just like Luke will teach Rey on Ahch-To, finding that life within herself, that balance within herself, and how that is then the first step in her reconciling with her blood lineage, everything to do with Vader. I know I don't recall there being too much about Padme in this, but I mean, the connection with bloodline here, very strong connection of she is the daughter of Darth Vader / Anakin Skywalker, and of course the conflict in that, right? She's so repulsed by that. And yet, like Joel, you mentioned, she's incredibly very much made for war. She's a general, just like her father was a general in the Clone Wars, of course, just like Vader was the Emperor's pit bull. Doc, I'll throw this to you. I listed a whole bunch of stuff. Specifically, I want to ask, the adventure on Majora's and everything she goes through. What do you think of Leia's character specifically, and what she discovers?
I thought that was cool. I thought Majora's was an interesting location. I like the ice motif. I like I like just the kind of mystery around it at first. Like, they keep asking about the Empire, but they very clearly don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
They have to do some exploring themselves, and they find out, like, oh, the Empire left this big thing here that's drilling the core to plunder its resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the people there are like the captain dude are very much like the Empire wanted us to work with them, but we didn't want to. But they didn't give us a choice, so they just stuck themselves here, and they've been here. They stayed here even after the Emperor died again. I like that. I like that we're seeing that planets are still not safe from the Empire even after the victory at Endor, not Endor, Endor and Andor. I like that. I like that seeing that. Yeah, the war's not over yet, even though they kind of won it technically. They're still fighting the Empire. The Empire's still doing its thing, and even though the big consensus among the galaxies that the Empire's done, that doesn't mean the Empire has stopped doing what it's doing. Like, it's still subjugating people. It's still plundering resources. And I like that Leia's instincts were ultimately kind of right. Like they're not done, and like they're always gonna have work to do. And it's sad that they had to interrupt their honeymoon in order to stop the Empire again. But that's what the Empire does. And I like having to see Leia try to balance her personal life and her political life. And I like getting to see that she doesn't have control over what the Empire is going to do. She doesn't have control over what the galaxy is going to do. She just has to go in and do what she can and help however she can and just hope for the best. And that also plays thematically into Leia, Prince of Alderaan, and Bloodline as well. Because in Leia, Prince of Alderaan, she's having to make a difficult decision between whether she wants to help her dad and their whole growing rebellion on Alderaan, or whether she wants to stay out of it. And that comes to a head with Kier, her original love interest in that book. And he gets involved and he ends up dying because of that. And same with Bloodline, where she tries to keep her political and personal life separate, but then her political enemies end up revealing to the galaxy that she's the daughter of Darth Vader. Right. So I really like this running theme between all three of these novels of Leia trying to maintain her own happiness and her own life separate from her life as a senator and a princess, but they always end up ramming into each other no matter what.
Yeah, well, great point. Especially that through line between the three novels. Again, the tensions between personal and political, specifically that moment when they're underwater and looks like all hope is lost, and that last engine just isn't going to go because I think they ran out of torpedoes. She summons the Edons, or she calls for help. What did you think of that moment? What does that moment speak to you about?
I just think it shows that Leia never gives up. She never, even when things are looking bad, and even when things seem like they're hopeless, she always screw it, I'm going to keep going anyway, even if there isn't anything else I can do. And they do end up getting a small victory in the end. Again, Murders still isn't fully stable. It's going to take a lot to keep that place from falling apart. But for the moment, they did win, and just like with the Empire itself, they found a moment of temporary peace. And they're just going to latch onto that as long as they can before the next thing rears its ugly head. But the point is that Leia never gives up, and she always tries to make sure that she can make things as best they possibly can, even in an impossible situation.
Yeah, I mean that you're just saying that brings me to that moment in The Last Jedi where they've summoned everybody and all hope is lost, and then at that moment, even she looks like she's about to give up. But then in walks Luke. Before we do get to Luke, Joel, I'll ask you. You want to share something about Leia's reflections on, not just reflections, but trying to come to grips with her being the daughter of Anakin Skywalker, the daughter of Darth Vader. What did you see in this novel about Leia and Anakin and Vader?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've always said, I think I've said this on the podcast, when it comes to Vader, we always get a very more Luke-centric kind of point of view about it. It's like he did the thing, and then he got redeemed, and now happy Force Ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi. And it's like, well, you, Luke, that's all well and good, but, to Leia, she knew Vader a lot longer than you did. She was Bail and Brea's daughter, and they probably were always toe-to-toe with Vader on a number of occasions. Her, be it political activism in the Senate, and then later in the rebellion, Vader kind of always loomed as this malevolent shadow over her life for years. I mean, Vader actively tortured Leia, as we remembered in the Death Star, and was there. Tarkin ordered the destruction of Alderaan. So to find out, oh yeah, he's also your dad. Yeah, she's not going to be happy about that. She kind of just kind of gets mad at even Vader gets this funeral burn pyre. The man who slaughtered millions of good rebel troops. Just for what? Just because he tossed the emperor down a shaft? Didn't even kill him. Or just went to Exegol.
I also love that thought Leia has where she thinks to herself, Darth Vader became ash while my dad, Bail Organa, became stardust.
Exactly.
Very poetic, yeah.
But also I think the irony is Leia can't escape the fact she's very much Anakin's daughter as well. She's very strong-headed. I mean, Padme is that too, but they're both kind of the same in a lot of ways. Strong-headed, kind of gun-ho, very loyal to their friends, very passionate. Kind of can get easily upset about things. There's a little moment where is Leia tapping into the dark side and on Endor for a second? It's we're not tapping into it. The anger and the emotions definitely get to her as well, and also kind of accidentally causing the problem on Madura herself by kind of getting a little too investigative. To quote Avatar, "There's no war on Ba Sing Se." I had to do that, but trying to be so preventative of something, you cause the thing that you tried to prevent in the first place. And I've always felt this kind of the dynamic between Leia and Anakin, where I always felt Leia had a lot of Anakin in her, and I think she kind of has to grapple with that. As much as to her, Bail and Brea are her true mother and father in every sense.
Again, Luke was never a general, from what I can tell. At least not really. Very often, Leia was a general. Anakin was a general. We see that in Clone Wars. Speaking of Luke, very quickly, really interesting moment here. I mean, part of what's happening is, this is leading to that flashback in Rise of Skywalker. We see Leia training with Luke, having her own lightsaber, all that. And even this question of a renewed Jedi presence in Republic affairs. I think we've talked about that in previous episodes. Kind of what could have been. I thought that was really interesting. If Leia had continued her training, if Luke had stuck around Hosnian Prime or Chandrila and built up the Jedi like in the late Republic, like in the Old Republic. Very interesting that teasing these possibilities. Specifically, Luke in his presence, very, very light touch, thankfully, because otherwise he would have overwhelmed it. Joel, you said you seem to want to make a bit of a quick comment about Luke in this novel.
Yeah, just interesting, kind of the continued direction they've gone for post Endor Luke, which ultimately end with Last Jedi and epilogal and Rise of Skywalker of Luke's going for a very lonely life here. Yeah, I think more in a way that even he didn't in Legends, where it's he really wants Leia to join him. But without that, it's sort of Luke gonna be kind of by himself now. I mean, obviously he's not gonna physically isolate himself, although it doesn't seem he doesn't hang out with a lot of his friends afterward. But we see he hangs out with Lando and Shadows of the Sith with the adventure. Sure. But he's kind of going that prequel path of detachment and not letting himself get too involved with others. Leia can sense oh, you're going down a path of a very lonely life here. Very lonely Luke. And I just find that very interesting. That's kind of the continued path that we've seen him on in Mando, in Shadow of the Sith, in Last Jedi, and now in here, kind of his direction as a Jedi. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. I guess I don't know if Doc, if you want to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're back. Do you have any quick thoughts on Luke before we get to the last chunk of topic?
I really like just sarcastic, dry humor Luke. I really like that we get that in this book. I like how he nudges Han about the wedding and everything. I love how he just tries to be supportive of their relationship while also just kind of being just acknowledging how awkward this is. I love I love the acknowledgement of the kiss in Empire Strikes Back. I love when he just kind of comes up with Han. They just kind of agree to never speak about it again. I think I love all that stuff, just little nods and winks like that. And I also like Luke trying to be genuinely supportive of Leia, despite not understanding just the complexity of her emotions right now, like dealing with her relation to Vader and how Vader treated her and everything. Like, Luke doesn't fully understand everything she's going through right now, but he still tries to be supportive, even though he doesn't fully comprehend. One of my favorite moments is when he tries to tell Leia what Vader told him to tell her, like, you were right, tell your sister you were right. And he tries to tell her that, but Leia's just like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear what Vader had to say about me. And Luke just doesn't tell her. And I think that's really cool. Like, he doesn't fully understand what Leia's going through, but he still understands that she's hurting and this isn't what she needs right now. She doesn't need to hear that. She doesn't need to know about Vader's approval. She doesn't need to know about that because that isn't what she needs right now. So he's just going to understand that. And I love that even though they are strained in that way with how they each relate to Vader, Leia still looks to Luke for support. And I love the final thing, I think in the final chapter, when Leia's just thinking to herself, like, I never want to be like Vader, but at the same time, I can't figure this Force stuff out on my own. So I'll try to see if Luke can help me out with that. And I love the representation of their relationship in this book. And Leia and Luke especially feel like siblings in this book. They feel like siblings who have had different relationships with their father, and like one doesn't fully understand the other because of how differently Vader treated each of them ultimately. But they're still siblings, and they still love each other, and they're still going to support each other no matter what. I really love that portrayal of their relationship.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to see Luke, the hero, the main character, since 1977. He entirely exists in this novel just to support Han and Leia's character. Again, the light touch, like Vader in Rogue One, just there for Krennic's character, and then for the rebellion, just little light moments to move the plot along, doesn't overwhelm. Okay. We're an hour 20 in, but I think I want to spend a little bit more time just looking at the relationship between Leia and Han. We've talked about this quite a bit, but I want to do this in two segments. Joel, you see that in the notes, but two aspects of this: the present and the future. But let's focus on the present for now. Yeah, I said it's sparky. There's a lot of, like, they raise their voice to each other. They should have gone, premarital counseling if it were possible. Extremely fast. Han just gets out of carbonite, like I mentioned before. They just defeat the Empire on Endor, or the Imperial forces on Endor, and boom, will you marry me? I love you. I know. Will you marry me? Etc. If I were their pastor, I would say, you don't want to take some time for rushing into this. But that, to Beth Revis's credit, she definitely explores that and doesn't paper over that. And I think this is a great picture of people working through things, a new couple working through things, working through their tensions, having it out. Really, I think there's a moment where Han, I think this is right, or maybe I'm confusing with another story, but Han is upset with Leia because Leia goes and tells reporters what she's thinking and feeling, and goes off and makes a plan by herself. And even if Han just wants to enjoy the vacation, he's upset because she didn't trust him to partner with her. And I love that. That is so incredibly real. It's realistic. It's human. And in that conversation, they find a partnership. Conflict can be this incredibly creative tool for compromise when it's an honest expression of real feelings and real expectations. And so, at first it was a little uncomfortable. Especially, again, Mark Thompson doing an incredible job of Han raising his voice to his wife, and of course Leia giving it right back. Gonna get her name. Scroll all the way up. What's her name? Saskia Marlavelle doing a great job of giving it all right back. But again, at the end, they find this wonderful softness. I mean, everything gets excavated. Han has to accept his wife's public image and has to accept her responsibilities and his role now in the co-pilot seat of Leia's political career. You know, he's so used to being the pilot of the Falcon. Now he's on this other ship called Leia's political career and public image, and he's in the co-pilot seat. And I think he really fights to accept that and works hard to accept that. Leia, you know, as I alluded to above, looking within. She has to go within, and Han is there to help her look within and embrace being more human, being more emotive, embracing the capacities of art and beauty in her own life, her relationship with Han and her relationship with Luke, like we mentioned, not just for the public but for herself. And so, it was again. It would be nice, you know, in the real world. It'd be good if they had more time. They don't have more time. It's a war. This is this weird sci-fi situation that I'm sure lots of people in the real world find themselves. But ultimately, I found their conflict and their creative conflict and their partnership really satisfying. Joel, I'll throw this to you. What did you think of just the dynamic in the moment between Leia and Han throughout this book?
Yeah. I mean, you know, Star Wars and relationship has always been flimsy at best. I once said, even with Doc on an episode, you know, Han and Leia's dynamic in Empire. There's some moments where Han gets a little touchy, but ultimately, that's the '80s for you. Wasn't good then. But you know, I think in terms of like modern day, I think they managed to make it work, and I think, you know, really goes to show just how Han is a way better person than Anakin ever was. In terms of, like, you know, Anakin and Padme, they got married in the middle of a war, and look how well that turned out. It destroyed the galaxy. But you know, Han is many things. Han is never possessive of Leia. Han is very, I think, never shows that, you know, to kind of, you know, disrespect in a sense to Leia. You know, she'll stand up to her and she'll stand up to him, and you know, he won't, you know, like, he doesn't care that she's a princess. You know, she's like, you're on this ship, you know, don't be princessy about it. Which Leia never is. But it shows just they do respect each other, and even though they fight, you know, Han's never, like, you know, possessive or super toxic about it, you know, in that sense. Like, in a sense, like, I feel like Anakin would. I mean, we saw how bad he got when Revenge of the Sith by the end. You know, Han's never like that. Leia's not like that and also, you know, kind of like Anakin, you know, Han's kind of more in the Padme role of, like, you know, don't shut me out, let me in, let me help you. You know, Han might not understand all of the politics or the Force, but he's like, you know, like I support you because you're my wife, even though this is a big con. You know, like, of course I'm going to help you with a con, even though I think it's ridiculous. That's what I do. And they think because, you know, ultimately it does somewhat succeed for them, their marriage. I mean, people always act as if in Force Awakens they got divorced the day after Endor. Like, no, they had good 30 years. It's just their kid went to the dark side, and that would separate the parents too. I mean,
we'll get to that in a few minutes, but keep going.
Right. You know, but for the most part, their relationship dynamic is strong. You know, it kind of edges away some of the more questionable things of '80s writing. But I've always felt, you know, like, Han and Leia have always kind of been the better of the relationships of at least the saga films so far. I mean, they are in a relationship, and you know, they fight, yes, but they do respect one another. And I think at the end of the day, that's what counts, the respect.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned everything with Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. This is the first time it really felt realistic, and the first, you know, I mean, you got Kanan and Hera. Thinking about that one was pretty good. I mean, it takes 4 years for them to actually finally kiss, but this is the first time Han and Leia really felt human and genuinely in love, even as they're having it out and hashing it out. And then, you know, the result of that the way they show up for each other. Doc, you look like you want to chime in there.
I love Han and Leia's dynamic in this book. I love how they balance each other out. I love how they push each other to look outside how they usually go about things. I just want to read probably one of my favorite passages from this book. It's a short conversation between Han and Leia, and it's a conversation actually referencing an issue from Charles Soule's Star Wars comic, where the issue where Kira meets Leia and tells her that story about how Han saved that kid on Corellia. This is such a good passage. I'll just read it right here. It's a short exchange.
What page are we on?
It's the beginning of chapter 51.
Okay.
Page 294 to 295. It's a short conversation between them, and I'll change up my voice so you know who's talking.
There we go. Got a performance right here. Go for it.
So Leia meets with Han, and it's like, and she's just like, I met Kira, and Han's like, Kira, my Kira? She's like, you're Kira? He's like, you know what I mean. And then she says, she told me a story about you. Han's like, oh no. And then she says, it was a good story. I highly doubt that. She said you got into a fight to help out a boy you didn't even know, that the goons were going to kill you until your crime boss stepped in. Kira made it sound like you were a fool to help. I was. You made a difference to that kid you saved. You gotta start somewhere. I love that. And just like echoing that line that Han says to Kira in that flashback, you gotta start somewhere. Like even when you're surrounded by impossible odds, as Han Solo often is, he's always willing to help. He's always willing to step in and help people, even if it doesn't work out. You gotta start somewhere, and that's such a good encapsulation of how Leia, sees Han. Like Han's always presenting himself as the cool guy, doesn't care about anything, but Leia knows he's the good guy, and she knows that he's always going to step his foot in and help out whenever he can, even if it backfires on him. He's always going to be there to help.
Yeah, like we've said before, the arc for Han is he's the excavation of his character, of his moral core, meeting Leia and Luke and the rebellion, and having this cause, and seeing that kind of like Jin, right? That there's more to fight for in the galaxy. This book does such a great job of reflecting on that, even as Leia, I think, is the more compelling character. It's true they do end up going for a while and lasting for a while. I do want to, at the risk of ending on a dark note or a sad note, though. I mean, we know by the end of by Force Awakens they are separated, though, and I think part of what Beth Revis is doing is showing the cracks in the foundation. Hairline fractures they're hairline fractures now, but something like their son turning to the dark side, it makes it seismic. I mean, like Madur's, it's a metaphor for the relationship. It raises these questions, right? How long? And the answer is for a while, for a number of decades. But also the cracks in the foundation. How long can Han stand next to Leia, the politician? He really ultimately does want to get his hands dirty, even in legitimate enterprises. He hopes for a more expressive relationship. He makes a home for her on the Falcon. We know, I'll say he makes a home for her on the Falcon. We know from Daniel Jose Older's last shot, they end up settling on Hosnian Prime because Leia's job demands it. How long can he stay cooped up? Just like cooped up in carbonite, cooped up on planet's side. I'm sure his job could take him wherever. Last shot takes him wherever, but how long could he stay? Home is on a planet as opposed to the Falcon. Similarly, how long can Leia abide her gruff, adventure-seeking, passionate husband? She really does want to attend to her duties of nation-building diplomacy, ultimately responding en masse to the First Order threat, which is something Han does take part in a little bit, at least at the beginning. She's made for war. How long until she actually has to become the general again, and that kind of limits the capacity for personal relationships. I don't know how much you guys may have saw this in this book, but do you guys think how well do you think it connects with those ruptures like Starkiller Base, the seismic ruptures that we see in Force Awakens. Doc, I'll go for you first.
I mean, they straight up call it a thermal oscillator, the thing they put down there, which is awesome because thermal oscillator is just a really fun word to say.
Yeah.
So that's a cool connection there. And
as a metaphor for the relationship specifically.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I love I just like the little, like, there isn't any direct references to what happens after this clearly, but there are subtle references to, like, when they say, like, maybe Beck's meeting with a bunch of other Imperials who are left over, and maybe they're like, whether they're operating under Palpatine or someone else working for Palpatine. Just speculating about what they're going to do next. Subtle allusions to the future. And I think this symbolizes the relationship very well because, like Madurs itself, the relationship, it does have its cracks, it does have its faults, but it can work if they just go at it from the right angle.
That's true. That's a good point. Joel, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, they ultimately separate because of their son, but Han and Leia never stopped loving each other at the end of the day. In Force Awakens, Han does come back, even though there's a little awkwardness at the end of the day. They hug, they kiss. There's like, look, Han and Leia never forgets Han. Like, it's not like, hey, Leia goes for another person after Han, and Han doesn't really go. It doesn't seem to go for anybody else after Leia. Really, it's just sort of kind of dealing with stuff, and then they come back ultimately one more time, and then Han's like ready to make the ultimate sacrifice play here. But Han is very much the adventurer. He does like to, and I think in some ways, I think that's kind of cool. Like, Leia does respect that, and Leia kind of is used to Han kind of gallivanting around. But at the end of the day, Han always comes back to her, and she comes back to him. So that's it's the old saying: if you love something, set it free, and if it loves you, you'll come back. And that's kind of how it is. There are two birds that always come back to each other at the end of the day, and I always found that about their relationship quite fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think it picks up the theme we've been talking about this whole for an hour and a half here of surface and core, right? On the surface, yes, they do these two different things. It seemed like they have to move apart, but their core, they're still bound together in their love for each other and in their son, the bloodline that they've brought into the world and the life that they've brought into the world. That is a bond that, frankly, I mean, again, it's a great point that you mentioned. Han sacrifices his life for the sake of the soul of this son of their son. I mean, that scene on the Resistance base or whatnot. Sorry?
Starkiller Base is where.
No, it's on the Resistance base.
Okay, that one.
Oh no, is it? I forget where it is. But our son. Yes. They repeat it over and over, and that is a great point. I mean, it's poignant that Midors, we spend all this time on the surface, on the ice, but then that moment with Leia and the Force and their plane coming together happens underwater, under the surface. So again, the theme of Leia having to deal with the large scale diplomacy, exploring her own connection to the Force and her own identity. Han wanting to be the smuggler, wanting to be the ruffian bad guy. I'm using ruffian, it's an old word. The bad guy, he's the good guy at heart who loves Leia. That is a great point. And credit to Beth Revis for bringing all of this out, looking back on the moments before the Return of the Jedi and the original trilogy and everything, all the canon connections in that. So that's all my notes. Very quick, Joel, final thoughts on The Princess and the Scoundrel.
Good book. Again, really like that first act on Endor probably the most. That's probably the reason why to read it. It does do a lot of good foundation setting for Han and Leia's relationship, both the good and the bad, kind of setting up why they kind of are the way they are by the time of Force Awakens, but also, reminding you they had a couple good decades Then, it's like everyone says their marriage was a failure. It's like, I don't know, 20 years is actually pretty good until your kid turns evil. So I think I call that a success.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I would recommend it. It's good, as Doc says. It's a good part of this unofficial Leia trilogy of Princess Scoundrel, A Bloodline, and Leia, Princess of Alderaan. It's a good Han Solo book, and I think, as you, Matthew, said, and I think a little bit Doc as well. For the first time, I was kind of like, oh yeah, Han and Leia do love each other. They are a good match for each other, and this is probably the best written they've ever been in terms of a love match. So, yeah, read the book. Good.
Yeah. Doc, you mentioned your feelings off the top. Final thoughts on Princess and the Scoundrel?
Very good book. Very, very good. I thought it was a very good Leia and Han story. I love what it does for them as characters and their relationship. Love all little connections to all the comic canon and even a bit of an Obi-Wan one as well. Love just getting more into Leia's head and to Han's head and showing them try to deal with the end of the war while also acknowledging that it's not over yet fully. They're going to have a lot ahead of them, but they're going to push on and take their happiness where they can get it. And also, I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get a moment where after Han's wedding, Balatik went up to Han and said, Han Solo, you're a wed man.
We can get that. We just got it right there. There we go. There we go. Well done, Doc. Yeah, I mean, again, I definitely enjoyed this book, and definitely the way Beth Revis uses this situation on this planet to force the characters, push them through, as paper canon does at its best. All stories do at their best. Funny thing about talking about a story for an hour and a half, you grow to appreciate it even more. So I'm grateful just to be able to explore these themes and hear different perspectives about them. So yeah, I enjoy it more than I did an hour and a half ago. I enjoyed it. I liked it. Now I think I'm come to love it. So definitely a great novel. Sorry, gather my thoughts. I've spoken a lot tonight. So I think that is a good place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining, everyone. If you liked what you heard, have some thoughts, please do feel free to put them in the comments below. Please do this. Give this video, this episode, a like, a share. Subscribe to the Star Wars Underworld channel if you haven't done so already. Also, of course, check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up, a like there as well, a subscription there as well. Doc, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me at my channel, Dr. Holocron. That's right for myself. And I just, like Joel said, we just did a commentary for Rogue One, getting ready for Andor. So you can find that up on my channel. I used a Weird Al Scarif Beach Party for the intro music.
Nice.
That'll be fitting. And that got it blocked in Russia. So sorry to my Russian viewers, but I guess you don't like Weird Al over there. Sorry.
Yeah. There are worse things in the world than can be blocked by Russia. Okay. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021, where I do some Twitter stuff. I mostly do a lot of Twitter talking, though, with our @IonCannonPod Twitter, where I've been talking about Andor and all these interesting things and a bunch of Star Wars stuff. So, yeah, you can find us there.
Yeah, again, Twitter is definitely the best way to interact with us. It's both on our phones. We're definitely checking it, looking at it. Joel definitely quick on the draw in responding and giving his thoughts, and definitely appreciate everything you're doing over there. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, please send us a line there. You can follow me on Twitter personally at NAUG485. Probably a lot more to do with soccer at this point, but Star Trek, you never know. But you got some Star Wars there too as well, interacting with the fandom, and Instagram MNEUG1138, and yes, the Ion Cannon Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. Again, Tractor Beam every Thursday or Friday on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Again, Twitter, Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod, and at the SWU, our whole network, and the Mothership Thursday night podcast. Lots of great conversations, lots of new podcasts growing. The Tales from Beyond the Galaxy every Wednesday night that has just launched over on Twitch, where you can also find us, I should mention, on Twitch at Iron Cannon Pod. You can find them at I believe it's TB. I forget the Tales Beyond the Galaxy, but the acronym is where you can find them. I'll retweet them in a bit. But yeah, great stuff going on there from down in Houston, Texas. So the Fandom Fam, it's growing, it's continuing, it's carrying on. Next week we're deciding what we're holding it open just in case Andor gives us something that blows our minds. It probably will. But we might have some other possibilities in mind. But for now, let's blow this thing and head on over to the race side.